Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into North Carolina's ambitious blueprint to completely overhaul its child welfare system. We're talking about the system that's supposed to protect the state's most vulnerable kids from harm.
To really get a sense of the challenge here, let's just start with one number: over 11,000. That's the staggering number of reports of suspected child abuse and neglect that county social services in North Carolina have to deal with every single month.
So that's the big question, right? How do you even begin to build a system that can handle that kind of volume? Well, to find out, North Carolina ordered a top to bottom review of its entire system. And that review led to the detailed reform plan we're going to break down today. All right, so first things first. Before you can build anything new, you've got to understand what's broken. And that's exactly what the first part of this report does. It diagnoses the deep systemic cracks in the way things were. This quote from the plan, wow, it really gets right to the heart of the problem. What the investigation found was that the very foundation of the system, the people on the front lines, was just under an incredible amount of strain. It was a recipe for burnout and, well, a revolving door of staff. And these issues, they don't just exist in a vacuum. You got to think of them like dominoes. High staff turnover means less experienced people are making critical decisions. Then you got inconsistent practices across 100 different counties, which basically means a child's safety could come down to their zip code. And without good data, the system is essentially flying blind, with no real way to know what's working and what's not. And, a huge piece of this puzzle is the funding. Just look at this. Counties are on the hook for a massive 41.1% of the cost. That means resources can be wildly different from one county to the next, making it almost impossible for poorer counties to hire more people or pay them enough to stick around. So, the big takeaway here is this. These weren't just little hiccups or isolated problems. These were deep, fundamental cracks in the system that were seriously compromising the state's ability to protect its kids. Okay, so we've seen the diagnosis. Now, let's get into the cure. The blueprint lays out a plan for fixing all this, and we're not talking about small tweaks here. We're talking about major, structural changes to build a system that's more consistent and, frankly, more supportive for everyone involved. The absolute cornerstone of this whole reform is something called the Regional Supervision Model. So instead of having 100 counties kind of doing their own thing, with some loose supervision from the state, this new model creates regional hubs to provide direct support, consistent oversight, and training. You can really see how this new division of labor is supposed to work. The state's central office, they're the ones setting the overall strategy and providing the tools. But the new regional offices, they're the boots on the ground, doing compliance checks and working hand in hand with counties to make things better. It's a much more hands-on approach. And to tackle that inconsistency problem right from the very first call, the plan recommends a single statewide hotline. This is a game changer because it means every single report, no matter where it's coming from, gets evaluated using the exact same criteria. But, a system is just a bunch of rules on paper if you don't have the right people to make it work. And that's why this blueprint puts a really heavy emphasis on rebuilding and supporting the child welfare workforce. A huge part of this is completely rethinking training. The old way was often like a one-and-done event. You go to a training, you check a box. The new way sees it as a continuous cycle. It's about developing skills over time, right there on the job, with coaching, feedback, and real ongoing support. And it's not just about training the people you already have. You've got to build a pipeline of new talent. So the plan says, let's bring back a stipend program to support at least 100 social work students every single year. The deal is, they get help with school, and in return, they commit to working in county agencies after they graduate. It's a win-win. And look, it goes way beyond training. The plan gets at the root causes of burnout. We're talking about finding ways to make workloads manageable, creating new support roles, and, crucially, making sure supervisors are trained to lead in a way that understands the intense trauma their staff deals with every day. Okay, so we've talked about these big structural changes, the new training, the workforce support, but what's the point? How does all of this actually add up to better, safer outcomes for the children and families this whole system is supposed to protect? Well, this slide basically lays out the core logic, the plan's theory of change. And it's actually pretty simple, but also really powerful. If you support your workers and give them better tools, they can do their jobs better. That leads to better and more consistent work across the entire state, which ultimately gets you to what matters most: safer kids and stronger families. And if you're wondering why this is all so urgent, just take a look at this. Between 2014 and 2017, the number of kids entering foster care for the first time
jumped by 9%. The need is growing, and it's growing fast. The system absolutely has to be strong enough to keep up.
And here's something that's really, really important. This isn't just a top-down plan cooked up by experts in an office somewhere. A key part of it is actually listening to the people who live this reality, the birth families, the relatives, the foster parents. Their insights are seen as essential to making sure these reforms actually work in the real world.
So at the end of the day, we have to ask, can a blueprint on paper really do all this? Can it truly transform the lives of thousands of vulnerable kids? Well, the plan itself provides a clear evidence-based roadmap. But the success? That's going to depend entirely on sustained commitment and follow-through. The blueprint is drawn. Now the hard work of building a safer future begins.